Well, good evening, Cedar Falls, and welcome to our regular council meeting for Monday, June 6th, 2022, commemoration of D-Day today. And now I'll call this meeting to order with a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Schultz. DeBoer.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Ganfield.
Here.
Sires.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Councilmember Schultz is absent, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And just for housekeeping, he did notify me that he would not be able to attend tonight due to schedule or timing differences where he's at. So with that, I now will ask for approval of a regular council meeting minutes for May 16th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion and second. Any discussion from council? From the public? Okay, motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that does pass. And I'll continue us on tonight with special presentations, which is item 2, a proclamation recognizing June 6th through 12th, 2022 as Iowa Museum Week. I'll read this proclamation. And I'll also note tonight that we have Carrie Alderts from the Cedar Falls Historical Society, as well as Dave Welter and Steve Bernard, who are co-chairs for the fundraising campaign for the Historical Society. So whoever you'd like to come forward is going to speak tonight, you're welcome to receive the proclamation. Thank you, Mr. Welter. I love the best.
Yeah.
So Iowa Museum Week, June 6th through 12th, 2022. Whereas the Iowa Museum Association has developed Iowa Museum Week to advocate statewide for museum appreciation, support, and attendance in our state, and whereas our local museums include the Ice House Museum, Victorian Home, Little Red Schoolhouse, Barron's Wrap Station, the Hearst Center for the Arts, UNI Museum, UNI Gallery of Art, Hartman Reserve Nature Center, Cedar Valley Arboretum and Botanic Garden, Grout Museum District, John Deere Tractor and Engine Museum, Dan Gable Wrestling Museum, and the Waterloo Center for the Arts. And whereas these museums play a crucial role in preserving the historical fabric, natural resources, identity, and memory of our community through the careful stewardship of art, artifacts, archives, the built environment, flora, fauna, and historic sites. And whereas museums provide educational resources and programs which support educators, expand learning opportunities for all ages, and provide active learning environments. And whereas Iowa's museums enrich our communities and contribute to the state economy through job creation, industry attraction, and worker retention, the purchase of goods and services, and as leading visitor destinations attracting tourism revenue to their communities. And whereas the Cedar Falls Historic Society is embarking on a $1.5 million capital campaign to construct a new 2-story museum space, which will showcase Cedar Falls' unique business, agriculture, and transportation history. And whereas educating young people about the heritage of Cedar Falls is critical for retaining these young residents into adulthood and fostering their civic spirit and pride for a lifetime. Now, therefore, I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim June 6th through 12th, 2022 as Iowa Museum Week in Cedar Falls. And I encourage residents to celebrate by visiting our local museums, by becoming paid members, and by supporting Cedar Falls Historical Society's tax-deductible capital campaign at cfhistory.org/take action. Signed this 31st day of May 2022, Mayor Robert M. Green. And so with that, for Mr. Welter, I'd love to present with this proclamation and
Thank you, Mayor Green.
and give you a few moments to speak about your project.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mayor Green, for sharing that proclamation this evening. And council members, thank you for an opportunity to speak with you tonight about some exciting plans that the Cedar Falls Historical Society has in conjunction with Iowa Museum Week. My name is David Welter, retired principal here in Cedar Falls, and I am the board president of the Cedar Falls Historical Society. I'm joined tonight by the co-chair of our fundraising campaign, Steve Bernard, who will speak in just a moment. And what I'd like to do tonight is give you a little bit about what we're trying to do with the Historical Society project. Our vision is to preserve and procure items of historical value from the community, which was born in 1962 and officially established as a nonprofit in 1964. The Historical Society provides educational opportunities for a large variety of audiences, from story time to outdoor movies for children to lectures, workshops for adults, and the Society also serves as a resource for generations of citizens to revisit, research their family histories, and share the stories of people, organizations, and businesses that have made Cedar Falls what it is today. The presence of the Historical Society can be experienced on 4 of our properties. First, the Victorian House Museum displays artifacts and exhibits where you can experience our community's history. The Ice House Museum, which I have a passion for, celebrates its 100th year this year since ice harvesting became a source of original business here in the community, and has an extensive collection in the United States that combines that original ice house with that collection of ice harvesting artifacts. It's also been listed on the National Register of Historic Places for well over 40 years. The Little Red Schoolhouse shares the experience of a one-room schoolhouse. All of my kids have experienced that. And after a 2-year hiatus due to COVID, Summer at the Schoolhouse Camp is reopening this summer. It began in the early 1900s, and that experience is equipped with a slate chalkboard and a pot-bellied stove. Finally, the Barron's Wrap Filling Station is a Depression-era gas station, complete with glass pumps and vintage signage, and it also serves as a tourist information center here in the community. The Cedar Falls Historical Society contributes to the impact that Iowa museums have on our state economy. For example, museums have a $384 million impact on the state and has generated $93.3 million in state taxes for Iowa's economy. As you know, history is always happening, and we cannot just stop collecting it, not just preserving what happened 100 years ago, but also what happened last year, last week, and even yesterday. In 2016, the board of directors at the Historical Society took a big leap. We wanted to expand by purchasing the property at 315 Clay Street, which we did, and it's been renovated so that the Historical Society's entire collection can be stored in a climate-controlled setting. Now we're settling our sights to extend the Historical Society's program and services at that property through a $1.5 million fundraising campaign. The plans for a Home for Our History campaign include renovating the main floor of the building into a large classroom so that the Historical Society can accommodate larger groups, incorporating interactive exhibits and STEM concepts to tell our city's history, and building an addition to the property that'll house a new 2-story museum that celebrates business, industry, agriculture, and transportation here in Cedar Falls, as well as put on permanent display the Lenore Train exhibit. The Cedar Falls Historical Society is the only organization dedicated to preserve, share, and celebrate the heritage of our beloved city. We believe a successful campaign to complete the addition and renovations at 315 Clay will allow Cedar Falls Historical Society to tell our city's story in a way that we've never been able to do so before, and give residents a source of pride and a place within our community. Steve?
Good evening, Mayor and Council, staff. Good to see everyone. As Dave noted, I'm Steve Bernard. I'm co-chairing this campaign with him. We all know this is a great city. Cedar Falls is wonderful, has been for forever, in my mind. So, we're doing this to improve the Historical Society's ability to preserve and tell the story of Cedar Falls. And we're hoping that a lot of people will join us in this effort and preserve our heritage. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Among them, you can visit one of the Historical Society properties that Dave mentioned. We can attend one of the Historical Society's programs or events. We can share with others what an incredible resource the Historical Society is. We can follow the Society on social media and things such as Facebook and stay up to date on the events of the society. Of course, volunteering for the organization and or the campaign is always welcome. We're always looking for good help. Becoming a member of the Historical Society. We start our fiscal year and our membership year July 1, so the timing is pretty good. And of course, we hope that people learn a lot more about the campaign, the Home for Our History campaign. And then, once you've learned about it, choose to contribute as a volunteer, as an advocate, and or as a donor. Historical Society's been at this for over 60 years. It's hard to believe, isn't it? What a wonderful group and a wonderful history there. It's helped citizens, families, businesses with personal ties to this community to collect and celebrate our local heritage. It's really a gem of Cedar Falls. We have a lot of gems in Cedar Falls. This is a big one of those gems, and it's a one of a kind in this community. And this campaign is really a key to furthering the mission of the Historical Society to honor the respect for this community and the capturing of its history. So I thank you for your time and consideration of the support. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. I also would want to note as well that this should be a special interest for the city because we don't have within City Hall a separate archive of historical documents. And I found it incredibly helpful using the resources of the Historical Society for researching early city leaders, city policies. So even almost like the Smithsonian Institution, it's not an official part of government, but we wouldn't be the same. We wouldn't understand our history without that organization. And the same holds true for the Cedar Falls Historical Society. So I thank you very much for bringing your campaign to our attention and look forward to helping in the year ahead as you work to raise those campaign funds. So, thank you. My second proclamation tonight is for Juneteenth, which is June 19th, 2022. And this is a proclamation I first read last year, and I believe it's important to read this every year. So I will just read here that we have June 19th celebrated as Freedom Day. Whereas on January 1st, 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation declaring all enslaved people in the Confederacy shall be then, thenceforth, and forever free. And whereas on June 19th, 1865, Union soldiers arrived in Galveston, Texas, deep in the former Confederacy, to proclaim the end of slavery to the enslaved people of that region. And whereas June 19th is celebrated as Juneteenth National Freedom Day each year by descendants of more than 4 million formerly enslaved people to commemorate the end of American slavery. And whereas after 250 years of institutional slavery, descendants of these enslaved people now have faced oppression through segregation, redlining, racial profiling, and other injustices. And whereas healing and reconciliation from the trauma of slavery and its repercussions can only occur through open, frank dialogue and a recognition of the dangers and damages caused by continued racism, both overt and subtle. And whereas the state of Iowa recognizes Juneteenth as an official state holiday, and whereas the Cedar Valley is home to a richly diverse community committed to the health, safety, and well-being of every one of its members, we, as the citizens of Cedar Falls, stand in solidarity with those pursuing equality, inclusion, and justice in their homes, workplaces, and communities, in our region, across our state and nation, and around the world. And whereas Juneteenth offers residents of Cedar Falls an opportunity to reflect and act on our individual and community responsibility to ensure justice for every member of society. Now, therefore, I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of the City of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim June 19th, 2022 as Juneteenth in Cedar Falls, and I encourage residents to celebrate the end of American slavery, to continue to work to end inequality and discrimination, and to actively participate in Juneteenth commemoration events, both physical and virtual, in Blackhawk County and beyond. Signed this 31st day of May, 2022. Mayor Robert M. Green. So with that, that closes our special presentations and brings us over to public forum, where speakers will have one opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on topics germane to city business. Does anyone from the public wish to speak in public forum tonight? Yes, please. Mr. Sharp, name and address for the record, please.
Rick Sharp, 1623 Birch Street, Cedar Falls. Same thing I talked about the last two meetings. So again, I'm going to discuss the public safety department and how their personnel are being utilized or lack of utilization. So when the discussion of the new fireworks zero tolerance policy came up, I stated that this department does not have a good track record of responding to the nuisance calls when there was a ban in place, so what would change with the zero tolerance policy? I asked if there was going to be an upstaffing in place leading up to and throughout the 3-day period of when fireworks would be able to use. I asked if the reserve officers would be used. No clear answer. I asked if the fireside PSOs would be used. The only response was given was that they could be used. But then the acting director went right into talking about upstaffing and the use of overtime. So 2 council meetings ago, you approved a budget amendment for the rest of the fiscal year, which included an increase in the public safety department overtime. The budget for the fireside was $30,000. The projected use was $98,000. The budget for the police side was $56,000, and the projected use was $84,000. So those overtime numbers look very similar to the pre-PSO era when the city staff and those council members who here that served back then expressed concerns about the high overtime. So here we are, at least 2 years into the full model, and overtime is still nearly $100,000 over budget. So where are these projected cost savings that was promised with the PSO model? And let's talk about overtime for this year. The contract states that employees who are called into work or volunteer on their first scheduled day off will get overtime at the time and a half rate. If they are called in to work or volunteer to work on their second scheduled day off, they will get paid double time. The contract also states if they are called back on an approved holiday or vacation, they will get paid triple time for their hours worked. So those rates, we are talking about paying these PSOs anywhere from $75 to $100 per hour to work overtime. Again, where are those savings? Back when you had traditional firefighters, which were paid at a lower hourly rate to begin with, any overtime was at the time and a half rate. So with these costs, why aren't the fireside PSOs being used to respond? Why not use reserves? And why not block off the calendar for future years? The acting director also spoke to difficulty in enforcement last meeting. While it may be true, it sounded like an excuse preparing you and the citizens to not get our hopes up for too many citations prior to and throughout the July 4th period. He stated again, how long do you want to spend on scene, getting statements, interviews, issuing citations because fireworks are still going off all over town, calls are still coming in? Yes, that may be, but that's why you upstaff and use the fireside PSOs. So is he implying that he won't be able to enforce zero tolerance across the city? The director then made an excuse for the fireside, saying that it's a balancing act. They still have to respond to fire and EMS calls. And yes, they do, but during my time, we did bar checks, commercial and rental inspections, training, public education activities, and we still managed to respond to fire calls just fine. So are these PSOs incapable of doing that? And remember, as the previous director had stated, fire and EMS calls were trending downward, which leads to a lot of downtime on the fire side, something again that the majority of you on the council had concerns with us working 24-hour shifts and not being productive. So the PSO program is here to stay apparently. The majority of you did not support Mayor Green's PS22 plan, which would have reduced costs and still provided the same level of service that we currently have. So now the burden is on all of you up there to ensure that the taxpayers are getting their money's worth with this program. We still have the same patrol staffing levels as we did in the pre-PSO era. As the acting chief stated 2 meetings ago on second shift, there were only 4 PSOs responded to calls over the last July 4th period. Well, guess what? On the weekend of May 20th on second shift, there were a few calls on firework complaints in Cedar Falls, and there was no immediate PSO response. Just like last year, there were 4 PSOs on duty for second shift. Calls sat waiting for 30 to 40 minutes. Maybe the police were busy during that time, but you know who wasn't? The fireside. Even a council member had to call and complain about fireworks in their neighborhood. Now maybe they got a quick response because of who they are. Finally, a third shift officer was dispatched to the first call 40 minutes after the reporting party called it in. So what's going to change? What is the plan? Why can't fireside PSOs be used? I challenge all of you up there to hold this department accountable for enforcement. Listen to what is being said by the
1
citizens.
minute remaining.
What's that?
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. And how the department head answers. Press them for more details. And if this department is still going to run the same type of staffing levels and response as they have always done, maybe when it comes time to appoint a director and police chief, you as the mayor and council appoint someone new outside the department, bringing in fresh, new ideas and creative, innovative plans. Because obviously what we have now is stale and still not working.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Does anyone else wish to speak for public comment? Seeing none, then I'll consider public forum closed and bring us over to special order of business. Item 4 is a public hearing on the authorization of a loan agreement and issuance of not to exceed $3.2 million in general obligation capital loan notes for essential corporate purposes. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That does pass. And Madam Clerk, do we have any written communications filed?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. So for staff comments, we have Director Rodenbeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, as you know, every year when we're preparing the CIP, one of the things we're doing as part of that process is determining what projects we'll use general obligation funding for. And then we always try to schedule those bond sales every other year. So this is the year that we do that. So tonight, our plan is to sell those capital loan notes on July 18th. So tonight's the actual formal hearing for that. And the first one here, the essential corporate purpose, we have that will go for just about 10 projects, some of those being Cedar Heights Drive reconstruction, Green Hill Road and South Main intersection, and Main Street reconstruction. So again, those are the items, the projects that qualify under the essential corporate purpose.
Thank you, Director Rodenbeck. And do we have anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, then I'll consider the public hearing closed and take us over to item E, or 4E, which is a resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action for the issuance of not to exceed $3.2 million general obligation capital loan notes for essential corporate purposes. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been moved and seconded. Any council discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Sires.
I'm opposed to issuing bonds because we're going to be paying for this over the next 20 years, as I understand. We had chances to cut our budget with even just the remodel of City Hall. That was $4.5 million, which actually these, with including 5 and 6, comes up to exactly $4,500,000. We have about $43 million in reserves. I think it'd be a better idea to take that out of there if these are actual needs for the city. If they're just wants, I can't understand why we would want to bond these. But I just am always a little more cautious than everyone else in these times. So that's all.
So Director Rodenbeck, would you want to, or do you have any info for the bond issuance tonight, why we do that, as opposed to just using reserve funds?
Sure. I think, I think in always you're looking in times of what are interest rates. Fortunately, over the past few years, there have been low interest rates in terms of bonding. I realize right now we're in a market where interest rates are creeping up, but I think, as you heard Lisa Roding talk about earlier, I think what you always have to be careful with when you use reserves is once you use them, they're gone. And you can't issue property taxes to replace reserves. But you can have property taxes to pay debt payments. So oftentimes that's why it makes sense for municipalities to still sell bonds, even though we have cash sitting in the bank. And one of the other things I just wanted to clarify is you'll see right in there that they're actually for 12-year notes, not for 20 years. So we tend to have very short cycles on our notes. We don't usually want to sell things for 20 years, so we would look at 12 years.
Okay, thank you. Any other council questions or comments on this?
I have a quick question.
Yes, Councilmember
Do
Hart.
we always let them fully mature, or are there times we can pay them off early, depending on whether it's an advantage interest rate wise, or?
Yep.
Just curious.
So usually when we structure our bonds, we always put in a call notice in there. So usually a few years down the road, we do that. And as many of you know, we've done that over the years. There's been times because of interest rates, we've called in the bonds, refinanced them, sold new ones to replace the high interest ones. So yes, the same thing with these. We'll structure them and have call notices in those as well.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember.
I just want to take this opportunity to learn. Is that what's helped to contribute to our great credit rating?
Right, I think,
Doing that?
having cash reserves, having maturity dates that are very short in terms of our bonds, I think all of those have been.
And paying them off early, does that help?
Yep,
Okay.
yep. So I think all that helps to our AAA rating. So we'll hopefully continue to get that same rating.
We'll have one more question, sorry.
Councilmember Russell.
Do the ratings, and this is just for me to learn as well, do the ratings have to affect the interest rate you can get? So is the higher, since we're AAA rating, does that allow us to get the lowest interest rate for the bonds?
Correct. Yep, so the higher your rating, generally the better your interest rate's going to be because investors would think they're more secure.
Okay, thanks. I thought so. I just was
Yep.
double checking.
Any other questions or comments from council on this? Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to institute proceedings to take additional action for the issuance of not to exceed 3.2 million for general obligation capital loan notes for essential corporate purposes. Moved and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Canfield,
Aye.
Sires,
No.
Dunn.
Aye.
5 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that does pass. And takes us to item 5, which is a public hearing on the authorization of a loan agreement and issuance of not to exceed $600,000 general obligation capital loan notes for general corporate purposes. Is there a motion to receive?
So move.
Second.
So moved and seconded to receive and file proof of publication. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes also. So, Madam Clerk, do we have any written communications for this item?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. Again, for staff comments, we have Director Rodenbeck.
Sure. So one of the things we have to do is have separate hearings for the essential corporate and the general corporate purpose. And general corporate purpose, which you're going to hear about now, are projects, and that's actually by Iowa code. And they're usually for things that are maybe more like the quality of life projects. I mean, when you think about essential, streets, sewers, that type of thing, general corporate tend to be for, things that are maybe more quality of life type projects. And those are limited to 700,000. So the only way we could do more than that is if we would have a referendum. But as long as it's under 700,000, then we don't have to have a referendum. So for this particular one, the 600,000, again, those were listed on our CIP, and it would have been things for like our new financial system, cameras, and portions of our annual street repair program that are more the amenities that fall under that, not the actual street construction.
Thank you. So with that, do we have anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none, then I'll consider the public hearing closed for it and take us over to the council side, which is item 5E, a resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action for the issuance of not to exceed 600,000 general obligation capital loan notes for general corporate purposes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Got the motion?
Second.
Got the second? So moved and seconded and open for council discussion for 5E.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Sires.
this is an obligation on taxpayers for the next 12 years, and I'm opposed to it.
Okay, thank you. And Director Rodenbeck, what cameras are those? If you could
Sure.
describe-
So we have surveillance cameras, like on College Hill, downtown. Those are the cameras that are out and about. Not traffic cameras. I wanted to make sure that's understood, that it's for those surveillance cameras.
Are these new cameras or ones that are replacing the ones we currently have?
It could be either. We put some in the CIP every year because we know there's going to be times we're going to have to replace cameras, but we're also looking at it. Seems like there just tends to be more and more demand for putting them in certain areas. So we put them out in the CIP every year to do really for both.
Other questions or comments from council? Okay, seeing none, then it's been moved and seconded to institute proceedings to take additional action for the issuance of not to exceed 600,000 for general obligation capital loan notes for general corporate purposes. This requires a roll call vote.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Canfield,
Aye.
Sires,
Nay.
Dunn.
Aye.
5 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that does pass also. And takes us to 6, which is a public hearing on the authorization of a loan agreement and issuance of not to exceed 700,000 general obligation capital loan notes for general corporate purposes. And is there a motion to receive and file proof of
So
publication?
move.
Second.
Moved and seconded and requires or all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that does pass. And Madam Clerk, any written communications filed?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. Once again, for staff comments, we have Director Rodenbeck.
Sure. So on this one, this is covering actually our river project. One of the things I should have mentioned earlier on all of these is if you take these amounts listed and you try to tie them to the CIP, the amounts listed here are going to be a little higher. And we do that on purpose. As you can see, it says not to exceed, a certain amount, 700,000, not to exceed 3,200,000. We won't actually issue bonds for those amounts, but we always safely aim high in the public hearing. So if for some reason something would change, if there's cost of insurance were higher, if we had to capitalize interest, anything like that, we kind of give ourselves a little wiggle room, I guess is the best way to say it. So I just know the river project's one of them, that if you would happen to look on the CIP and see what it says for GO funding, it's not going to say 700,000, it's going to say, I think, 525,000. And again, it's just allowing us that little wiggle room, and the same with the other ones as well.
Okay, thank you, Director Rodenbeck. And with that, do we have any public comments for this item? Okay, seeing none, then I'll consider this public hearing closed and take us to 6E, which is a resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action for the issuance of not to exceed 700,000 general obligation capital loan notes for general corporate purposes. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and open for council discussion.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Gamble.
just like to get a description as to why we have a 700 and a 600. If the limit is 700, is that not 1.3 million?
It's per project, but why on the 600,000 one, we tend to group some smaller ones together, where the river is kind of its own standalone because it is a higher amount. So it is actually per project.
Okay.
And that's why we have to have two separate hearings. Like for the first one, we only had to have one and we could group them all together. We have to have a separate hearing for each 700,000, basically.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
is this the part of the river project where they're going to remove the metal rods and the concrete and do the bank improvements, or what part of the project is this?
This is portion of city funds in order to work on the riverbank improvements and safety improvements in the river that spans from the Main Street Bridge to the West First Street Bridge.
Okay.
Thank
Just
you,
like I
Councilor Burr.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Sires.
it's not so much what we're gonna spend the money on, it's the borrowing of the money, and then paying over 12 years. So I'm opposed to this one too.
Okay, thank you. And just for clarity's sake for the public, we're not obligating additional funds to the city. We're not adding to the city's budget with these. We're just saying how it's going to be paid for, correct?
Correct. I think what you're saying in our CIP process,
Right.
that's referring to, Mayor, that is, again, something we plan out because we want to try to, again, keep that level property tax impact. And so by issuing bonds every other year, trying to do just replacement debt, kind of helps us do that. And I think, as many of you know, one of the things we pride ourselves here in Cedar Falls is also our low debt that we have in comparison to a lot of other cities our size. So kind of going back to Ms. Dunn's point too about our AAA rating. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions or comments from council? Okay, seeing none, then it has been moved and seconded to institute proceedings to take action for the issuance of not to exceed $700,000 general obligation capital loan notes for general corporate purposes. Moved and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Gamfield,
Aye.
Sires,
Nay.
Dunn.
Aye.
5 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And over to item 7 now is a public hearing on proposed plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the Center Street Corridor Streetscape Project. Is there a motion to
So
receive and file
moved.
proof of publication?
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That does pass. And Madam Clerk, do we have any written communications filed for this?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and for our staff comments tonight, we have Mr. Dave Wiki, City Engineer. The floor is yours, Mr. Wiki.
All right, thank you, Mayor, Council. Tonight's public hearing is for the Center Street Streetscape Project. What the project involves is streetscape improvements to Center Street from Clare Street to West Lone Tree Road. Included in those improvements are new curb and gutter, sidewalks, ADA compliant pedestrian ramps, biocells, and landscaping elements. The total estimated cost of construction for this project is $1,130,649, and the project will be funded by the Emergency Reserve, Stormwater Funds, Cedar Falls Utilities, and private contributions.
Thank you, Mr. Wiki. Do we have anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this Center Street project? Evening, Mr. Newcomb. If you just provide name and address for the record, please, sir.
Jim Newcomb, 407 Longview Street. I want to thank you for this consideration of this project. It's a good example, I think, of a community working well with the city. There's a lot of great people out in North Cedar that have really taken this project to heart. They've worked very hard. We have a lot of great people out there that are looking forward to this project. Kind of looks like a main street for North Cedar, and the plans are beautiful, and I want to thank the city for the consideration, and we certainly hope it gets passed, and I'm excited about it, and so are the people in North Cedar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this? Okay, if not, then I will consider this public hearing closed and bring us over to council for 7E. It's a resolution approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the Center Street Corridor Streetscape project. Is there a motion to approve it?
So moved.
It's been motioned and seconded. Been moved and seconded and open for council discussion now.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Ganfield.
I just want to ask a clarifying question. How much of the funding is going to come from emergency reserves for this project? I believe I'd asked Chase, but I forgot the number. Not to slight Mr. Newcomb's efforts, but I just wanted to double check how much is coming from emergency reserves for this project. Waiting on.
Have 800,000.
Okay. Question answered. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
what was
Counselor?
the neighborhood or the community there was a private contribution, if I recall correctly, right?
It shows,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Just over 50,000, I believe 53.
Okay, okay. And, I mean, they raised that, I feel like, I mean, it shows the support for that. I don't know. I just think it's great. Last week I camped out at Blackhawk Park. So if you ride your bike from, the urban core down Center Street, it's so much safer than it was just a few years ago. And I think about the kids out there that, instead of having those little skinny sidewalks that maybe weren't even functional, I just think it's great for our North Cedar neighborhood. So I appreciate the hard work that the citizens of Cedar Falls, because I think it was, it's North Cedar folks, but it's also the folks that just love on North Cedar overall. So I am very excited for this project.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilor Dunn. Any other questions or comments from council?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Ganfield.
I guess I'd like to go ahead and reiterate, I'm all for the project. I think it's a great thing for our North Cedar area as well. The concern I have, and I risk being called out of order on this, is that we talked about emergency reserves at some length in hesitation of paying for some other city initiatives because they were coming out of emergency reserves. We decided not to have an audit of our public safety in a North Cedar area that doesn't have a fire department right now. And now we're going to spend $800,000 of those emergency reserves on this. I think that's backwards. Just want to go on record and state that.
Yeah, thank you. And I should note, too, that discussion for the project happened before Councilor Ganfield's time on council, that I think it was a goal-setting session 2 years ago. Council agreed that we would want to spend emergency, or what at the time was flood reserve funds, on projects to help restore North Cedar. And so it was seen as a very valid project at the time. Now, of course, council could change its mind, but it's not as if this was just taken up this year. It was a plan well in advance. So just to be aware of that. Yes, Councilor DeVere.
Well, I just wanted to point out, and I think Jennifer maybe could say if I'm correct, but a lot of our emergency reserve money was built up after the work that we did in the floods of 2008, and a lot of the service of the citizens that we were able to get federal money back for as we ran the resource center up at the North Cedar School, among other things. So we did earn a lot of this money because of North Cedar.
Excellent.
Is that right?
Thank you.
That's correct.
Thank you, Councilor DePere. So any other questions or comments on the item? Okay, seeing none, then it's been moved and seconded to, for a resolution approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the Center Street Corridor Streetscape Project, and requires a roll call vote.
DeBoer.
Aye.
Cruz.
Aye.
Harding.
Aye.
Canfield.
Aye.
Sires.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And so next step in the process for Mr. Gaines, we can answer that for us. What will the public look to see next for this?
Sure. So the next steps of this project, we'll see a bid letting here in the next couple weeks, and then as well as followed up with a contract for the contractor.
Okay, excellent. Okay, and that takes us out of our public hearings and takes us into old business. The first item in that is number 8, which is passing ordinance 3011, amending Chapter 16 offenses and miscellaneous provisions of the Code of Ordinances relative to the use and explosion of consumer fireworks within the city limits upon its third and final consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Open for council discussion. Or excuse me, let's go, the form we do is council questions first, and then we'll go to public comment, and then back to council for discussion. So are there any questions or comments or early for council on this? Seeing none, then does anyone from the public wish to speak on the item? Okay, so, yes. Provide name and address for the record, please, sir.
Well, this isn't getting to be a habit. Tim Houts, 2128 Pleasant Drive. This is my third appeal, and I guess it's my last one. For amending the fireworks ordinance. It looks like your minds were made up before the May 2nd meeting. I have no doubt that it'll pass tonight with overwhelming vote, because it passed overwhelmingly after 2 votes. I just want to remind you of some of the consequences of your actions tonight. And by the way, D-Day, June 6th, 1944. We've got some heroes that are still alive from that. And we respect them, we honor them. What a great group of heroes we have. It just happens that my daughter-in-law is over on Omaha Beach today, singing songs with her choir, singing songs of peace and goodwill. Well, did you know that June is also PTSD Awareness Month? I haven't heard any proclamations about that. But post-traumatic stress syndrome, or disorder, affects many age groups and folks from all walks of life. Generally, it can be caused by some kind of life-changing traumatic event, like a house fire, personal injury accident, physical attack such as assault, catastrophic events such as tornadoes or high wind storms, and combat environments such as war. PTSD does not go away. It is a wound of the spirit in an individual that stays hidden most of the time, at least until there is a trigger for re-experiencing that traumatic event. For combat vets, it can be fireworks. When the trigger happens, they experience a rapid heart rate, hypervigilance, pacing, flashbacks, looking for a way out, sometimes expressing a burst of anger, heightened senses such as looking for a way out, and sometimes the sense of smell, hearing, movement, visual acuity, and sleeplessness. Treatment can include ongoing personal counseling, group processing, a well-trained service dog, medication, and a loving, understanding family. And that's what I've got. Amending the Cedar Falls Ordinance opens the door for a large group of individuals to re-experience PTSD at a minimum of 3 days. Earlier I spoke about creating a safe haven in Cedar Falls as part of being a welcoming community. Well, did you know that the AMVETS convention for the state was here in Cedar Falls this weekend? I know Mayor Green knows because he was there. Our national commander was there. Were we a welcoming community for veterans? Well, I also have to mention the firework vendors. Most of them are from out of town. Their main goal is to sell as many consumer fireworks as possible in the 4 to 5 week window. They use social media, TV ads, signs, pop-up tents, and hype to sell their product. Who gains? Manufacturers, distributors, tent rental companies, vendors, and a little goes back to the state coffers. Based on our state surplus revenue, Iowa does not need a little extra revenue. Once you amend the ordinance, it'll be very difficult to change it back again unless the state law is repealed. It doesn't look like that will happen in the near future, but we can do our part and stand up to this nonsense by keeping the ordinance in place. I'm wearing my combat action ribbon. That doesn't come with a medal. It comes with being fired at over and over and over. I don't like to have that happen in Cedar Falls. Please, stop the nonsense.
1 minute remaining. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Houts. Does anyone else from the public wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, then I'll bring it back to council. And any final questions or comments from council prior to the vote? Yes, Councilor DeBerth.
Well, I did receive one email that I thought was worthy to bring up and maybe suggest, and it was an email that talked about instead of spending your money to buy fireworks or make noise, you instead consider giving that money to maybe the Humane Society or, like we heard tonight, the Historical Society to do good for our community instead of making noise.
Certainly.
And I thought it was an interesting email and wanted to pass the idea along.
Yeah, certainly. To Mr. Hout's point, certainly MVETS as well takes donations. So if we're looking to directly support veterans, that certainly is a noble cause.
Good idea.
Thank you. Any
Mr.
other
Mayor?
questions or comments? Yes, Councilor Dunn.
I want to, just for my own, I want to reiterate that my intention with the last two votes, and I assume how I'm going to vote here in a second, is not to make things worse. It is to make things better. And I kind of disagree with if it doesn't work that it can't go back, because we're having the discussion now to change it for what it is. And so if I do hope that we would give it time if we would pass it so that we could see if we note the change. I don't know a person up here who doesn't respect the service of our veterans and appreciate your service. So my votes that have come up to this point have not been to disrespect people. It is to recognize that we are in a situation that we were put in by the state legislature. It has gotten easier to sell those fireworks in our city over this past legislative session, and is to try to make it better, which is narrowing the window and making enforcement more stringent. And so I guess I'm not here to disrespect anyone. I'm here to try something different in the hopes that it'll be better.
Thank you, Councilor Dunn. Other questions or comments from council? Yes, I'll note also, being a veteran, I certainly appreciate and understand the difficulty of PTSD. And to Councilor Dunn's point, we're in a position that we didn't ask for from the state legislature. And I would, as I've said in past meetings, I would love for the legislature to allow cities the ability to mandate for ourselves whether fireworks will be sold or not. And so here we are as a council and as a mayor dealing with what's been dealt, the hand that's been dealt to us, and we're doing the very best we can to be sensitive to the needs of a variety of community members while achieving that. So Certainly, we'll be looking for continuous improvement in the city, and as we find from this experience, if this does pass tonight, we'll learn from it for the third, fourth, and fifth, and be able to make recommendations for the next year as well. But I wouldn't want anybody to, as Councilor Dunn mentioned, I wouldn't want anybody to think that we weren't supportive or that this was intentionally meant to disturb veterans, but instead is meant to accommodate for reality and to deal with the reality that we have in front of us. So with that, it's if there's no other council comments, it's been moved and seconded to amend Chapter 16 for the use relative to the use and explosion of consumer fireworks within city limits upon its third and final consideration. Moved and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
DeBoer,
No.
Cruz,
Nay.
Harding,
Aye.
Canfield,
Aye.
Sires,
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
4 voting aye, 3 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Two voting nay.
2 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So that does pass, and we'll have comments toward the end of the night as we have the staff updates to talk about what the plan is for tomorrow for rolling out educational materials and things like that, so the public is aware. So with that, that item's been passed and moves us to item 9, which is passing ordinance number 3012, amending Chapter 24 Utilities of the Code of Ordinances relative to stormwater rates upon its second consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Open for council questions. Seeing none, open for public questions or comments. Also seeing none. So back to council. Then no comments. So it's been motioned or moved and seconded to pass ordinance 3012, amending Chapter 24 relative to stormwater rates upon its second consideration, and this requires a roll call vote.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Canfield,
Aye.
Sires,
Nay.
Dunn.
Aye.
5 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That brings us over to the consent calendar, where these items will be acted upon by a voice vote on a single motion without separate discussion unless someone from the council or the public requests that a specific item be considered separately. And as always, we're very happy to bring items out for separate discussion if anyone likes. So we have items 10 through 13. Does any council member request to pull one of those items for discussion? Okay, seeing none, does anyone from the public wish to pull one of the items 10 through 13 for discussion? Also seeing none, so I'll read those items. 10 is receiving and filing City Council Community Relations and Planning Committee minutes of May 16th, 2022. Item 11 is receiving and filing departmental monthly reports of April 22. And then 12 is approving applications for cigarette and nicotine and vapor permits. And finally, 13 is approving the following applications for beer permits and liquor licenses. So is there a motion to approve these items?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that does pass. That brings us to the resolution calendar, where these items will be acted upon by a roll call vote on a single motion without separate discussion unless someone from the council or the public requests that a specific item be considered separately. So does any council member request to pull an item 14 through 36?
22.
Number 16.
Just a
Mr.
moment.
Mayor.
So Councilor DeBeer?
22.
22. Okay, and then Councilor Sires?
Number 16.
16. Okay, any other items from council? Okay, seeing none. Does anyone from the public wish to pull an item for us to discuss separately? Yes, Mr. Sharp. Which number?
I couldn't hear back here.
16 is pulled. So, yep, thank you. 19, okay. All right, and any others? Okay, so I'll read those minus 16, 19, and 22. So 14 is a resolution approving and adopting the city's FY23 fee schedule. 15 is a resolution approving and adopting a revised job classification for the position of Public Works and Parks Supervisor. 17 is a resolution approving and accepting a quit claim deed in conjunction with the 1985 transfer of jurisdiction of University Avenue from the west city limits to Hudson Road. 18 is a resolution approving and accepting a quit claim deed in conjunction with the 1986 transfer of jurisdiction of Hudson Road from University Avenue to West First Street. 20 is a resolution designating the dates and locations of the annual Sturgis Fall Celebration and Cedar Basin Music Festival. 22 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an agreement for lease of artwork with Amelia Gotera relative to placement of a sculpture at 311 Main Street. 23 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of agreement in support of the Sturgis Falls Historical Society relative to FY23 Community Betterment Grant. 24 is resolution approving and authorizing execution of agreement in support of the Cedar Valley Soccer Club relative to an FY23 Community Betterment Grant. 26 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of agreement in support of the College Hill Partnership for a FY23 Community Betterment Grant. 26 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of agreement in support of Grove Cedar Valley relative to a 23 Community Betterment Grant. Then 27 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of agreement in support of the Volunteer Center for Cedar Valley related to a 23 Community Betterment Grant. And then 28 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of agreement in support of the Waterloo Cedar Falls Symphony relative to a 23 Betterment Grant. Now over to 29 was a resolution approving an amendment to the Pinnacle Prairie Master Plan, amending the use of Lot 16 and Lots 21 through 31 in the Pinnacle Business Center North subdivision from mixed use and multifamily to Western home. 30 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an owner purchase agreement and approving and accepting a temporary construction easement in conjunction with the Center Street Corridor Streetscape Project. 31 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a supplemental agreement, number 4, to the professional services agreement with Snyder and Associates, Incorporated, for engineering services relative to the Cedar Heights Drive reconstruction project. 32 is a resolution approving the certificate of completion and accepting the work of Peterson Contractors for the 2020 street construction project and approving and authorizing the transfer of funds from the Street Construction Fund, GO 2020, and Sanitary Sewer Rental Fund to the Street Repair Fund, LOST. Then 33 is a resolution approving and accepting the contract and bond of Owen Contracting for the 2022 alley reconstruction project. 34 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a stormwater maintenance and repair agreement with DuPaco relative to a post-construction stormwater management plan. 35 is a resolution receiving and filing and setting June 20th, 2022 as the date of public hearing on the proposed plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the 2022 University Avenue Biocell project. And finally, 36 is a resolution receiving and filing and setting June 20th, 2022 as the date of public hearing on the proposed plans, specifications, form of contract, estimate of cost for the 2022 Seal Coat project. Is there a motion to approve 14 through
So moved.
36 minus 16, 19, and 22?
Second.
I have a motion moved and seconded, and this requires a roll call vote.
DeBoer?
Aye.
Cruz?
Aye.
Harding?
Aye.
Canfield?
Aye.
Sires?
Aye.
Dunn?
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That takes us back to item 16, which is a resolution approving and adopting the FY23 payroll resolution. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councilor Sires, you had questions or comments on this?
I do have a few. I would like to know, what did we pay Carlson and Detman to do the study? How much money was spent on the study for the brackets and the pay raises and all that kind of thing?
For this year, you mean? Or,
Whatever we paid them so that they could come up with the different amounts of money we paid to our salary people.
so actually, there would have been no fee for this year.
What was it last year then?
So last year, so the last time we did our pay plan study was in 2018. And I really don't remember what we paid them in 2018 to do that. And then what we do is, every 3 to 4 years, we try to update that pay plan study to keep it up to date. People that maybe weren't here before, we actually had gone 20 years before we had done a pay plan study. So at the time, when we did one in 18, we really wanted to make sure we keep it up to date. So every few years, we do that. But on an annual basis, what they give us is a memo that you saw in the packet just kind of showing what they see in the market in terms of how we need to adjust our pay bands. In other words, do we need to move them by a certain percentage, the minimum and the maximum? So that's why I was asking about this year, because the memo you saw in the packet, there wouldn't have
How
been a
much
fee
was
for
it in
that.
18 then, do you remember?
I don't remember how much it was in 18.
Okay, don't
I
worry about,
I
don't
mean,
worry
we can
about
get
that. I'm
We
gonna
can
make,
get that for you.
no, that's all right, I'm gonna make this pretty short. I think it grouped up the salaried people with also the workers. I don't mind giving them a percentage. I'd like to see anybody on a salary get their raises by merit. So the whole thing, as it boils down to, other than raising the percentage of salaried people who are making quite a lot, the other thing that I'm concerned about is not all of our workers that work for the city have insurance. Now, when Obama put through that any employer over 100 people had to give insurance out, I know we made some of our people turn them into part-time and they can't get insurance, but yet they still work at the city. That was kind of my concern. I would like to seen not only just an increase in the percentage, but I'd like to seen all those people covered by insurance. And that makes it kind of tough. I can understand the seasonal workers, but some of these people work for us all year long, are called part-time, and don't get insurance. I would like to seen that on there. Those are my things. I'd like to see people actually get their salaries raised on the merit basis, and then I would have liked to seen some insurance.
So I can address a number of those things. First of all, if you go back, the folks that were part-time back in, I forget what the year was that required that we have a look-back period of 29 hours or more. Those hours were slightly adjusted because I think we had 32 hours for a part-time person, so they were just slightly decreased. So they have the same benefits that they did at that particular time. When you talk about salary personnel do go through a merit-based system. There's a percentage that's put in that the matrix, we call it, and all of the salary personnel are scored, and those scores actually go into that matrix, and they are awarded their raise by that merit-based system. So,
But isn't it right now a percentage, 3.2% or something? It's all going to go up across the board. I'm going to vote in favor of it for the fact that you can't divide them both out, and I think there's a tremendous amount of great people that work for the city of Cedar Falls, and I'm not going to deny them their increase.
the salary people know that it's not a consistent rate if you look in there. There is a merit-based system that was put in there.
Okay, and I would have liked to seen that insurance covered. I think it was probably about, wasn't 16 years ago, would have been around 8 years ago that he passed that. But I always thought that was really not quite fair to people. I could see it when it was seasonal, but when they work for us all year long and then just barely make it under that, I'd like to see those people covered with our insurance. That's all.
I just wanted to clarify about the across the board. So the union increases are across the board. So you saw in the cover memo that, so the Parks Public Works did settle for a 3% across the board. Public Safety was 50-cent market adjustment an hour plus the 3.5%. So the union was across the board. And then the non-union is all merit. So whether they're salaried or hourly, they are merit-based.
Any other questions or comments from council on item 16?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I would love, if you could send me as an IOU, I suppose, that matrix, just so I can compare for my frame of reference for my own learning. I do agree also that we have great staff. I do think I want to see where that matrix lines up for the percentages on the salaried raises for long tenured employees especially. So I'd love to see that information. Appreciate it.
Other questions, comments? Seeing none, then it's been moved and seconded for a resolution approving and adopting the FY23 payroll resolution.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, you're right. Okay, please. I apologize for that. Mr. Sharp, name and address for the record, please, again.
1623 Birch Street, Cedar Falls, Rick Sharp.
Thanks, sir.
So, yeah, looking at the new payroll resolution, I was just kind of amazed, first off, seeing the city administrator becoming the first city employee to crack the $100 an hour pay barrier. So based on a 40-hour work week, that's almost $210,000 annually. We were paying this position a wage similar to larger cities that have a full-time city administrator and a part-time mayor. We were the only city in the state for decades that had both a full-time city manager and a full-time city mayor until Waterloo copied us that model last year. But larger cities than us and Waterloo seem to operate just fine with a part-time mayor and a full-time city manager. Unfortunately, as a council, you seem to not look at that cost savings and going that route. Secondly, when I'm looking at the public safety payroll, I see two traditional fire captains, Brad Sherwood and T.J. Taylor, being paid less than their subordinates on shift who are PSOs. Sherwood is making $40.31 an hour, and Taylor, who was just named your Fire Officer of the Year, makes $37.16 an hour. Individually, they have more years of fire and command experience than the rest of their shift combined, and I would also argue that the other two shifts individuals experience as well. So a PSO 4 makes $36.69 an hour, a PSO 9 makes $41.53 an hour, a public safety supervisor lieutenant makes anywhere from $43.26 to $52.85 an hour. And according to your pay band, the control pay, which is 100%, is $39.59 an hour, and you can't even get Taylor, your Fire Officer of the Year, to that level. Just because these two individuals aren't certified as PSOs doesn't mean they should get paid less than the rank and file of that department. I would argue that the PSOs on the fire side are not doing any police-related work in their downtime or enough of it to merit the pay they are getting, nor do the majority of them have any intention going back to the police side. I get that the wages, what's in the contract, are what you as a council agreed to, but you are also the ultimate decider on wages that should recognize the value and experience of individuals like Sherwin and Taylor offer not only to their shifts, but the department as well, and have their pay adjusted accordingly for that. I'm also looking at the PSS captain pay. So I see there's Yates at $58.56, Zolendek and McNamara each at $57.63, yet she has the least fireside experience both on the fire ground and fire command of either of those two individuals. So why is she getting paid almost $1 an hour higher when she lacks their experience? Shouldn't merit employees be evaluated on their knowledge, skills, and abilities amongst their peers in the same rank at the same job they are at or entering into? It doesn't matter that she might have had more experience than the police side. The fire side is a totally different job, and that police side work shouldn't be counted or relevant to the fire side of work. Again, you have the ability to adjust wages to reflect that experience or lack of experience. It's disheartening to see with the inflation rising in the private sector that most public sector and retirement pension wages have not remotely kept up with the cost of inflation. But here in Cedar Falls, you continue to hand out 3 to 6% plus annual pay raises and pay employees at wages as if they live in larger cities like Des Moines. Is that really fair to the taxpayers?
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Okay, so with that, anyone else wish to speak for the payroll resolution? Okay, seeing none, then it's been moved and seconded to approve and adopt the 2023 payroll resolution and requires a roll call vote.
DeBoer.
Aye.
Cruz.
Aye.
Harding.
Aye.
Gamfield.
Aye.
Sires.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That takes us to item 19, which is a resolution approving and accepting a settlement agreement regarding driveway approach to Ashworth Drive, purchase and sale agreement, warranty deed, public utility easement, and temporary construction easement agreement, and approving the form of the termination agreement for the easement and release of right-of-way easement with all in conjunction with the Ashworth Drive extension project. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Open for council questions first. I didn't see any. And then so we have public comment as well. So ma'am, you had asked to speak to the council? Just provide name and address for the record, please.
My name is Lisa Johnson,
Hey, Ms. Johnson.
4923 Hudson Road. My husband Corey, 2 children, and I live at 4923 Hudson Road, which is adjacent to the property in question. We purchased this home in 2008, and it has been our dream home with the perfect amount of privacy and seclusion, and still with a close proximity to everything in town. We strongly oppose the construction of the Ashworth Drive extension for several reasons. First and foremost, the location of this road will destroy our privacy. The road is scheduled to be 40 feet from all 4 of our bedrooms. The noise will be extensive, and the amount of traffic on this road will be 500 plus cars a day. The Planning and Zoning Department will tell you that the setback from the road is normal. However, when others build a house, they can choose where their bedrooms are. I am not afforded that option as the structure has been in place for 100 years, and all of our bedrooms are on the north side of this house right next to where this road is planned. Reason number 2 is the fiscal irresponsibility of this project. The first point I'd like to bring up is the fact the city didn't feel this extension was necessary when the Prairie Winds and Prairie West subdivisions were approved and built. Marty Ryan with Planning and Zoning stood in front of the entire city and stated that during the approval of this addition. The city's own public safety official, Desi Dugan, stated that the lack of the access points was an issue. The only thing the Planning and Zoning Department would say is that they couldn't force the developer to purchase these properties to put in the extension. While this may be true, it is the sworn duty of the city to protect its citizens, and if that means denying the subdivision because of the lack of access points, that is what should have been done. Aldrich Elementary School was also approved well after the subdivision was approved, and a second access point should have been a priority before the school was built, not after the fact. The safety of the children attending that school should have been prioritized before the school was built. The city has $930,000 earmarked for the construction of the 600 feet of roadway, according to the City of Cedar Falls Capital Improvement Program, item number 111. Construction of the road is set at $825,000 and isn't broken out any further. I feel the city should be more transparent with the citizens on how nearly $1 million is being spent and show that it is being done in a responsible manner. If you reference page 3, item 9 of the purchase agreement to the Nichols, it's page 192 of the agenda packet, the purchase agreement states the city will be paying for the installation of utility infrastructure under this road and all utility hookups for Dave Nickel, the owner at 4919 Hudson Road, for at least 6 residential lots. This cost isn't broken out in the CIP item, but I believe it should be explained to the citizens of Cedar Falls as to why city tax money should be used to profit a single individual. If the goal for Mr. Nickel is to develop these lots, the cost of at least that utility infrastructure should be at his expense, just like any other developers are required to do. The city is setting a dangerous precedent in paying for a developer's utilities in this case and opens the door for other developers to push back as well. I bet several other local developers would love to join this new program you appear to be supporting. The city administration has chosen to hide the true cost of purchasing this 1 acre of land in the cost of the construction of the road. This is unethical at the very least. Just maybe it has something to do with the fact that Mr. Nickel has friends on the city council.
I'm going to rule that comment out of order.
Okay. Last summer, when Mr. Nickel was too lazy to mow his own property,
Also, I'm going to rule that comment out of order for disrespect.
Okay. This property has...
And that's your second.
Okay.
You have 3.
Okay. This property has not been mowed more than one time in the last 376 days. It still has not been mowed this year, and no mow May is over. It seems like a conflict of interest that it is not being held in the same regard as everything else in the city should be held. It should also be noted that the fair market value of the property was $103,000 instead of the $124,000 being offered, based on the appraisal done by Raleigh Appraisal dated September of 2020. At that time, the house was in a somewhat livable condition, but is not inhabitable now. The taxpayers are on the hook now for a structure that should not be valued at what it is. Being fiscally responsible with taxpayer money should be a priority of this council. The third point is that this road does not get the city the desired second access to Aldrich Elementary. The administration is trying to make you think it does, but Ashworth does not go currently all the way to the school west of our home. From what I know, the city has no current plan in place to resolve the issue with the developer of the subdivision. Will the city be paying for the rest of that developer's utility connections as well? There's also the proposed Arbors to Green Hill Road extension that would serve this purpose. This idea was suggested by Councilman Sires as a possibility.
So Ms. Johnson, you're at 5 minutes, but I'm going to give an additional minute.
I appreciate that. Thank you. The city administration has proven to us that the safety of our family isn't their priority. We've asked for enforcement on city code related to a jagged, illegal fence that was put up of scavenged material. The fence had sharp edges and was placed within feet of where my children ride their bicycles and rollerblade. I can provide pictures to anyone. We have code enforcement that have come out and it broke the code, but they were not asked to take the fence down. Then when there's, If the city council agrees that my family's life doesn't matter, then there should at
Ms.
least.
Johnson,
Yes,
you're at time.
okay, thank you.
Does anyone else from the public wish to speak on item 16, or excuse me, 19? Yes, sir. Name and address for the record, please, sir.
My name is Dave Nickel, and I live at 3019 Lovejoy Drive in Cedar Falls, and I own the other half
Yes, sir. You have 5 minutes, sir.
of the lots. And I'm 100% in favor of this proposal, and I backed it all along, and I'm still backing it today. And some of the comments that she made was very disrespectful to me and my family, and I don't appreciate it because there was many things happened in a matter of a year and a half when her family decided that they'd try and block this road. And I think that I've forgiven them, and I know that we'll proceed with the road, and it's a chance to get a road going to the new school, and I just back it 100%. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nickel. Does anyone else from the public wish to speak on the item? Okay, seeing none. Back to council. Any comments or questions? Okay. Seeing none, then moved and seconded. And I'll read it again. Is resolution to approve and accept a settlement agreement regarding driveway approach to Ashworth Drive, purchase and sale agreement, warranty deed, public utility easement, and temporary construction easement agreement, and approving the form and termination agreement for the easement and release of right-of-way easement, all in conjunction with the Ashworth Drive extension project. Moved and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
DeBoer,
Aye.
Cruz,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Canfield,
Aye.
Sires,
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that does pass. And takes us over to item 22, which is a resolution approving a revised preliminary plat of West Fork Crossing. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And Councilor DeBrew, you had questions or comments on it?
Yeah, I pulled this because I was hoping that I could go over with Stephanie, I guess, the roadway connections. I think it's very important that all the major roadway is completed, and I wanted to make sure that it is. And I wasn't sure from the road or from the map what the names of the streets were to know whether or not that's being accomplished.
Yes, so Karen will go through the phasing for the overall development when we reviewed the overall preliminary plat, and then just a couple changes that are proposed for a smaller area that you're considering tonight.
So I put up an image on the PowerPoint here. Denny can bring that up. Just to go over, so that what's being changed right now is just for phase 1. And you can see on the screen here, the changes are to shift Wild Horse Drive slightly south and Broomfield Drive slightly north, so that they can make the lots more uniform in size. That's the basis of these minor changes to the preliminary plat for phase 1. With regard to your question about the phasing, this does not change the phasing, and we made sure that the staff report reflected the conditions that were approved by council when the preliminary plat was approved. So I have the phasing plan up here if people are interested in knowing what that is.
It really wasn't the phasing I'm concerned about as far as the street connections.
Right.
On phase 1, what roads do they connect to, and will it complete so that people can get in and out?
Right. So phase 1 does complete all the way Waterbury Drive over to Union Road. So that will be the first phase of construction. The number 1 there, the pink area, is phase number 1.
So Union Road is clear over here to the left.
Clear to the left, right. Then phase 2 is the yellow portion on the image here. And then phase 3 is the connection that would go to the south. So one of the conditions was that at the time of phase 3, that a temporary construction road be constructed down to 27th Street to serve the construction traffic so it wouldn't go through the neighborhoods. And then ostensibly that same temporary road could be used then. The condition was that phase 4 would not be approved until a street connection, that critical street connection to the south was made to 27th Street. So the first 3 phases could be done on that one means of access to Union Road from Waterbury. And then at the 4th addition, they would have to have at least one road extended south to 27th Street.
So is the yellow arrow the temporary construction road that you're talking about? And what is that made of? Is it gravel or blacktop or?
So we'd have to, the council would be able to review that at the time of that final plat was approved for that 3rd edition. But it could be gravel at that time for temporary construction easement for the traffic. But it would have to be constructed as a street then before they'd be able to do phases 4, 5, and 6 of the subdivision.
Okay, yes, Councilor Cruz.
Ms. Howard, can you get that slide back up, please? The phase 1, there's a road going up and turning to the left. Does that go into Lexington Heights? That I'm seeing, or am I in the wrong spot here?
The road that goes to the west, to the street connection to the north there, the
Well, I guess there's two of
furthest to
them.
the north.
Okay. Yeah, there's 2 of them. One goes straight up, and then the other one, for the number 1, to the left of number 1, there's a road going up and it turns left.
Yep.
That one. That one, and then the other one to the left of that. Well,
Yeah.
there. Are they both going into Lexington?
No, Lexington Heights is to the east.
Okay. So that one goes into Lexington.
So that's the Waterbury Drive connection there over
Okay.
to Lexington Heights.
'Cause I can't read okay. So there's going to be 2 access points for phase 1. And then going north, those 2 that I initially asked about, where do they go into?
So that's going to undeveloped or to land that could be developed in the future to provide connections to the north at such time as those property owners may decide to develop.
And what's that currently zoned? Do you have an idea? Residential, or is that?
They are residential properties to the north, and I believe they are zoned A1 right now.
Okay.
But I could be mistaken about that. It's either R1 or A1. But they have homes on those lots.
Okay. Okay.
They have what's on the lots?
There are they're large lots with a single-family home on each one,
more
except for
acreage
the lot that goes directly to the west where that street goes across is owned by an individual that may want to develop in the future. He had asked at the public hearing to have that road connection so that it was set up so that he could develop that in the future.
Okay, any other questions or comments from council on item 22? I don't know if I asked about the public, if anyone from the public wants to talk about 22. Not seeing any. So it's been moved and seconded for a resolution approving a revised preliminary plat for West Fork Crossing. Moved and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
DeBoer? Aye. Cruz?
Aye.
Harding?
Aye.
Canfield?
Aye.
Sires?
Aye.
Dunn?
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And that was our resolution calendar. So that moves us over to bills and claims. Is there a motion to approve bills and claims for June 6th?
So move.
Second.
Motion, or moved and seconded. And any council discussion? Any from the public? Okay, moved and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
DeBoer?
Aye.
Cruz?
Aye.
Harding?
Aye.
Canfield?
Aye.
Sires?
Aye.
Dunn?
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Do we have any council referrals tonight? I didn't see any in the packet.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Cruz.
Back in February and March, I did 2 referrals on the shared parking for the character districts for downtown. And 2 parts of this, I want to add a little bit to that. There's a discussion at 26-196 section C-4-C, which talks about the time of day or the signage for the shared parking. I think it's important that we have, when we talk about the other components of shared parking, what time of day is going to be allowed for the shared parking.
Okay, so what's the motion for the referral?
To add to my previous referral, the section I just designated to be discussed. And that's one part of it.
Is it, procedurally speaking, is it possible to add to a previous referral?
Mr. Mayor, we did once already.
I wasn't asking. So this was in the past, and is this already being taken up by planning and zoning?
I think that's the
It's in the
practical
process?
question. Where are we in the process of first
Yeah.
referral and whether or not it can be added to? So I'm not sure where we are on that.
Could I respond?
Just a moment. Yes, Director
So
Sheets?
related to referrals that we have on the list, of the parking referral that I'm recalling on our list right now is about shared parking. What constitutes shared parking? Where should it be located? That was an additional referral from the original list of referrals that was added after that original list. So if maybe we want to clarify if we're wanting to tweak that one, or if we're wanting to add to the list of referrals another item. That's the question.
So is there a motion then to refer to?
So, okay, yes.
Okay, and then we can discuss it.
Yes, I want to add to the referral
Okay, so,
in simplest form.
yeah, motion is to add to the existing referral, which I assume
Second.
we know what it is. Okay, so motion second, open for discussion.
Okay, to clarify, Mr. Rogers mentioned this first time that I added to my original referral that if it wasn't taken up, we could add to that. Subsequently, I asked where we were with the scheduling of these referrals, and Director Sheets gave us a detailed email defining when it was going to take place, and it was stated September, October-ish, or down the road, basically, quite a ways down the road. After I looked at this further, I wanted to add some clarity or an additional component of 26-196 C-4-C for specificity on the time of day that the shared parking would be required. That we wouldn't have midnight to 5 in the morning as the time we would have shared parking. Along with that, I want to move this up on the schedule to be discussed at the next committee public works session, because we owe it to the merchants to have them know what their world's going to look like. Developers need to know so we don't have construction going where it's going to change potentially. So I think it's important that we discuss this sooner than later, and I think moving it up, it's not a difficult topic. I'd like to see us move it up to June 20th.
So as I understand the motion, you're adding that to the motion of June 20th. You didn't mention that before. So just.
I tried. I'm doing it right now.
Okay.
You would have to
Would it be easier
amend the
simply to say that on the schedule that Stephanie has, just to move it to the top instead of the September date?
You'd have to amend the motion or amend the referral or make another referral, correct?
I could make a two-part referral if we wish.
So we have 3 items left on the referral list, as I recall. The one is about P&Z review of site plans, which our Planning and Zoning Commission is anticipated to make a recommendation at their meeting on Wednesday, and then it will come forward for council consideration. So council will see that one pretty soon in terms of set the public hearing and then hold the public hearing. So that's the current one in process. After that, we had vinyl siding, I believe, and then we had the shared parking additional referral. So if you want to change the order of considering the shared parking before the vinyl siding, right, we have not started on those. So once we get the site plan one through, then we can tackle the next one.
Makes sense.
So do we need to have
Comment
formal?
to that, Mr. Mayor?
Can you please not interrupt?
It's a discussion.
I'm speaking, and I would ask you, when other people are speaking, please don't interrupt. Please.
Well, it's a continuation of my discussion.
So the question that I have is, do we need to have the July or the June 20th date officially included as a motion, or can you just do it?
What we're asking is to be able to get through each one of these one by one. And so we're in the middle of working on the site plan referral one, which will be in front of council soon. And then we're able to move on to the next one. So that would be staff's request, is to get the site plan one through first.
Okay, but that's not required. Council could decide differently. Like technically speaking, they could shift it. So that's up for council if you want to do that, to change it to have that discussion on the June 20th. Is that correct?
So Mayor,
Yes.
how would, it still has to go through the planning and zoning portion. I just don't see a way to get it to June 20th. But
Mayor?
even if we
Yes.
move that particular item up, it would be very difficult to get to the June 20th.
Okay, Councilor Cruz.
My understanding is the next component or the step of this is to have a committee meeting on the topic, then council decides, and then they send it to planning and zoning. That's where the referral went to the
Some of the referrals were, I'm sorry. Some of the referrals were pretty specific, so I think the shared parking referral was specific about considering the distance and considering the, the portion of it being on the road adjacent to the property that might qualify for it. So I think we did anticipate that that was pretty specific about what it was. Probably didn't require much council discussion in order for P and Z to consider it and bring a recommendation back, unless council's wanting to discuss any amendments to that or changes before we take it up with P and Z.
And I've tended to look at P and Z and the new standing committees as being co-equal. So things don't have to go straight or go through Public Works or through the committee that handles, like I said, Community Relations and Planning. It doesn't have to go through that to get down to, it could go straight to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So would you have concerns that you'd want to have it at the committee level first? Or
What would planning and zoning know that we want without a discussion?
Planning and zoning is its own separate entity that's a recommending body, and so I would question why they need to know what we want in general. I mean, does that make sense?
We don't want to give them the answer.
I mean, yeah, that's the way it works in my brand. I mean, I'm asking for clarity, because we don't want to send things to planning and zoning that we want so they can just rubber stamp it and send it back to council. We send it to them because that's their job. They're appointed as members of our society to do their due diligence and look into what's the best for planning and zoning for the city and then make a recommendation, which we can choose to ignore and vote 5-2. But I would want the exact opposite. I wouldn't want planning and zoning to know what I want. I would want planning and zoning to have their discussion and do their due diligence and then make a recommendation to me for me to do my due diligence.
Councilor Dwyer.
Well, it seems kind of complicated on the shared parking with the prior referrals and then the new ideas, that it seems like going to the Public Works Committee so that we can iron out what all these different items were might be helpful, so that the P&Z can then understand what the aspects of all of this are. And then it would go to the P&Z, and then I think it would be handy if the shared parking went before the vinyl siding. I think that's what Daryl's trying to get to.
Mr. Mayor.
Am I right?
Councilor Cruz had his hand up.
That makes a little more sense.
Ms. Dunn go next because she hasn't spoke yet.
Councilor Dunn?
I echo, I personally, first I want to, how many things were referred back? Can I get a reminder of, like, because I feel like we need a reminder of how many things got referred back as to why it's taking the time it's taking. Do you remember how many items?
I believe it was 6 or 7.
Right, a large amount. I echo Councilman Harding's thoughts that, the whole time through this discussion of downtown zoning, I've heard multiple times, well, what's going to be the job of planning and zoning? Well, this is their job. So I very much want to know what the citizens who serve on planning and zoning have to say. We've hashed these conversations out over and over and over to the point where we have things that don't move along in our city that some of us feel are, need to move along. So I guess I'm just echoing Councilman Harding's I very much appreciate and want planning and zoning's input on these issues before we go back to us talking about them again in a committee setting or wherever.
So Councilor Dunn, what would be your preference then for tonight out of this action? Do you have a thought of like
Well,
just not sitting something down?
I have a couple thoughts, and one I think you're going to tell me that I need to wait because it's not on the motion. The way that we go about bringing up referrals has been brought up the whole time I've been on council, and I want to revisit that, not necessarily just on this. My preference would be that we carry on with whatever's in the works now that staff and planning and zoning have been working on, and just work through the original list of things. I guess if there's this additional thing that needs to be talked about, it's the councilman's right to bring it up as a referral, and then it's our right to vote it up or down, right? Or if there's a consensus to move on. I don't think it's a surprise that the thought of going back into this body talking about something without the Planning and Zoning Commission's input is not something that I'm looking forward to doing.
Councilor Cruz.
As far as I recollect, the previous referrals on various topics have always been referred to a workshop or a committee of the whole, which is now Public Works and so on. So before Planning and Zoning knows the flavor of the argument, the flavor of the referral, we would have a discussion amongst us on the three components, and I can list those if you wish. But I'm adding one component that I noticed that talks about shared parking and the time of day to allow that shared parking. That's the minor part. The major part of this is we're entering the construction season. We've been in it for a while now. I believe it's prudent to move this up and not wait till September, October-ish to discuss it. Parking component, shared parking component, has no relevance to vinyl siding. I don't see the connection there. You could talk about all of them in one night, and in fact, several times we've had lists of topics brought forward with multiple items, and there's nothing to say that we can't talk about a number of them in one night. But probably more importantly, the merchants need to know downtown how their environment's going to change with or without shared parking, whether the shared parking is going to be required on site or if they can have it up to 600 feet away, if the street parking next to a property is going to be allocated as shared parking. These are all very important things that council should talk about, decide what we would want as a council, then go to planning and zoning. Truthfully, I don't even think, and Mr. Rogers can answer this, a change in parking requirement is not a zoning change, is it? It wouldn't go to zoning, planning and zoning. We're just fine-tuning the shared parking.
It's all part of the zoning ordinance downtown, so it's a zoning change. It'd have to go through the same process.
Okay.
Private parking. We're talking about the private parking requirement. That's what's in the zoning code.
Public, yeah, public parking.
General urban, urban 2, and storefront. Right.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes,
just a little blurb. We have been to be fair, the council has been talking about this. I went on vacation last year at this time, well, like a month away, and we were talking about it then. We talked about it all through the whole summer and fall, and then we talked about it the beginning of this year. So it has been discussed. I don't want the public to think that we haven't talked about it. We have over and over and over again.
Mr. Mayor.
So, yes, as I understand, for what Councilor Cruz said, is we want as a council, we need to decide what we want as a council and then go to planning and zoning with it, which we've done in the past. So to go to, basically say, the council has this concern, send that down to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They work through it and provide a recommendation on it. And they could say, no, we think it should stay the same, or yes, we agree that it should change, and it comes back up to council. Now, if council then goes against the P&Z recommendation, that requires a supermajority vote, correct? So there is some checks and balances or some support there. So that certainly, it's not that we're telling with these questions, we're not sending that to planning and zoning, just say, make it happen. We're asking for their input and their feedback. So we're okay there, I think.
The referral is to Public Works Committee, so my vote would be let's vote on whether we want to send it to the Public Works Committee, because that was the original referral. Even, I mean, semantics aside of where it should go, I think from a procedural standpoint, he made the referral, and we can vote on whether we think it's
Actually,
pertinent to do it.
Yes.
to clarify, the referral I made was to Committee of the Whole, which is now Public Works. That's on the books.
That point of order, we still have a Committee of the Whole, and we have the Public Works. Is that under committee?
No, it's community relations.
It's community relations. It's its own.
Well, Councilmember Schultz is in charge, or the
Yeah.
chair of Public Works. It just hasn't met yet.
Yeah, so they're separate.
It's, the old referral could be modified to stay with Committee of the Whole, Public Works, or what's the other one? There's a big long name for it, and I gotta find it here. Community Relations and Planning Committee. So whichever one is most relevant for a parking discussion, it should continue that process. What I'm trying to do here is two little tweaks. Add a component about shared parking as to the time of day it's allowed, okay? The other two still stand, and then bring it forward instead of waiting to September.
Okay, so is that clear? Can we call the question?
That's what I'm doing.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
can I say one more thing? If it's for private parking, isn't it up to the person who builds the thing when they say it's best for them to have a time factor? Am I wrong? Because we're talking about private parking, right? So it's, I guess.
Correct. In the ordinance, since we can't specify everything in every use, we said it would be up to the property owner, the developer, about when the shared use would happen, what's most appropriate for the types of uses they have in the building as to when that should happen.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
We're going into the weeds here because shared parking is also up to 600 feet away and to the adjacent building. So if you're going to specify the time of day for these places, besides in the building, you're affecting the public's access to what should be public parking, the shared parking.
So again, I want to be careful now. I think we've gotten really far down the road on the discussion of it. And I would like to draw it back, so to your point. So this is to have, the motion is to have this discussed in Public Works? I think whatever committee. So what's
Committee Relations and Planning, I think would be the appropriate spot.
So send to Community Relations and Planning? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. What action is anticipated to come out of that committee meeting?
Respond? Whether we allow shared parking 600 feet away, whether we allow street parking to be allocated for a private, it's in the code right now, 26-196 E14.
You can't do that by state law without sending it to planning and zoning first.
So you could make.
So
we have to have the discussion first to determine if we want to send it to planning and zoning.
So
It's already referred to.
After the discussion, what's the action that the committee's going to take? Is it going to refer it further? Is it going to make a recommendations to council to then do something
To
else?
planning and zoning.
Council's right here, right now, talking about it.
I understand.
I'm wondering about the extra step. If staff knows enough to modify the referral, pending referral, to planning and zoning, couldn't we just do that now, assuming council goes along with that referral? I'm asking about the intermediate step to committee, whether that's necessary or not.
Does staff have the adequate information then from that page? I think you're looking at what, page 78 and 79 to understand what he's trying to do?
Yep. In the listing that I provided council about the timelines, we understood the referral about shared parking would be to have the Planning and Zoning Commission consider the distance allowed for shared parking, as well as the shared parking that's currently in the code adjacent to the building on the public right-of-way. That was the referral. I believe we have Councilmember Cruz wanting to add to that particular referral on also considering the time of day it's permitted.
Correct.
Something about signs? Didn't I hear something?
It's part of the C-4C in the parking section of the character districts where the zoning administrator designs signage, markings, but the thing they don't talk about is, are we going to allow midnight to 5 in the morning to be the shared parking time? Doesn't make sense. I mean, that's what could happen with the development or the street. I think that's something we should look at.
Well, the sign would reflect whatever time period is allowed if they address that. Would it not?
That or location of which spots are allowed. That's my understanding what signage would be, is where are the shared parking spots? If we want to include the time of day, that's why I'm doing the referral, to make sure the signage includes the time of day.
Oh, I see.
Okay, because midnight to 5 in the morning, your shoppers, your patrons of your bars and restaurants are home. Well, not at midnight necessarily, but it's getting pretty thin. So that's why I'm referring the time of day discussion for that specific section I highlighted, along with the other two. Because I know, Mr. Mayor, you wanted very specific, so I'm pointing out at the codes sections.
All right, so with the information we have here, is this enough to vote on the referral? Anything else needed?
Can I have clarification?
Just point of parliamentary inquiry, do we have a second?
Yeah, we
Yes.
had one.
We did.
Yeah.
Okay.
We do.
Councilmember-
Are we still specifying a date or?
No.
It was a two-part referral unless you want me to split it.
I think it's fine together, unless council wishes to split. Okay, so can you please read that motion for us, Madam Clerk?
I have a motion to add to the previous referral, to include the signage, to include time of day for shared parking as referred to in 26-196C-4-C, to be specified and to move it up to a committee meeting, whichever is fitting. And I didn't know if we were still talking about June 20th. No. Yes. That was brought up.
I can keep it general if that's,
Okay,
Keep
with
it
no.
general.
but
with
not
no-
September and October. I'd like it done.
So moved up to a committee.
Okay. So moved and seconded. Does everyone understand what's on the floor? Okay, so moved and seconded, and all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so let's see a show of hands for aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, and nay. 1, 2. Okay, so that does pass. We'll decide what committee that gets moved to. And do we have any other referrals tonight?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Ganfield.
Yeah, I don't want to cut anybody off, and I don't want to abuse a gentleman's agreement, but given that we were reviewing the regular meeting minutes from the 16th, and Mr. Sharp's comment regarding a rebuttal public forum of sorts, I'd like to refer to committee that we discuss the admin policy or whatever controls our agenda as to adding in a public forum and other potential revisions as suggested by that committee.
Adding a public forum where?
At the end of the meeting, in addition to the beginning, as Mr. Sharp had mentioned
Okay.
on the 16th.
All right, so that referral has been brought forward as a motion. Is there a second to discuss?
I second.
A motion and seconded, open for discussion.
Well, we had discussed that previously when we changed the agenda and agreed to the one public forum. So now if I understand you, you're trying to go back and add a second one? Or are you trying to do away with the one at the beginning and just go to a public forum at the end?
Thanks for your clarification. I would actually be seeking two, one at the beginning and one at the end. Obviously, we'd need to be particular about what is in those. I wouldn't want it to just be a free-for-all, but I would be asking for another one. But I would refer it to committee to get into the weeds, so to speak. There may be other agenda revisions that we could look at as well at that same time. But that was the one that brought it as a referral tonight, was because I forgot to do it last week.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Cruz.
I'd be in favor of that if we would have the second public forum be related to the agenda items of that night, not something else brought out.
And all of that could
And
be
that-
decided in the committee.
Yeah.
Well, that's what, okay.
Okay, so do I have enough information for that vote?
Sure.
All right,
Yes.
so it's been motioned and seconded to, well, actually, how do you read the motion?
To refer to committee to discuss the admin policy, to include adding a public forum to the end of the meeting, as well as other agenda revisions.
Okay, and I would just note that that would be the admin committee would be the natural place for that to go. Okay, so motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, so it does pass also. And do we have any additional referrals tonight? Okay, seeing none, then that takes us over to city council updates. Do we have any updates tonight? Or for
Mr.
general
Mayor,
discussion?
I'm
Yes,
sorry.
Councilmember-
I just want to, I know, since I was elected, however long ago that was, that there was a discussion about, I guess, it wasn't a written rule, but a kind of an etiquette for referrals. And I believe that there's a reason for it. I believe maybe it's to put it more in the public face instead of maybe doing a last minute thing. I understand the reason for last minute referrals. Obviously, if there's maybe a really time sensitive thing, but I guess, I believe I've heard Councilwoman DeBurr talk about it before, and I would just like to revisit that, and mainly because I want to re-educate myself and know why that's important, or why that was kind of a unwritten etiquette or rule in the past, because I feel like these last minute, especially really detailed referrals, I don't know that that's the best way for this body to function. So, and I don't know that's the best way to function for our community. So could we talk about maybe that past little blurb?
Well, we don't want to get into a big, I don't know if you can do discussions during council updates, if that's not really what it's for.
Well, when do we do that then? When do we do that? And I'm not trying to be smart. When would I do that? Is that a referral I should have made?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I'll do it next time. We can talk about it.
Well, I actually,
Or we could include it in the agenda,
yeah,
sorry.
I was just gonna say that can be part of the items that go to admin policy number 7. And I do have some requested changes I'd like to have included. So I'm glad that now that we have a vehicle to put it forward, and that's something that I would like to have us potentially codify, is to say for a referral, unless it's something that specifically came up that evening, they'll be considered out of order if they weren't reduced to writing ahead of time. Because I very much would like to see the actual motion in the council packet. And we used to do that. I thought it worked well. We've just gotten away from it because it was only a customary procedure. It wasn't the rule. So I have to go off of what the gentleman's agreement is and whether council will self-enforce that. So that's a great thing that we can add into it, just for council or for admin committee deliberation.
Mr. Mayor, though?
Yes.
Or Kevin, I don't know that you can add your additional items to the prior referral because that wasn't part of the referral, can you?
It said additional, if you read that motion, it said that item and additional.
Other revisions.
Other revisions. Anything else for council updates tonight?
We had the kitchen sink.
I think it was already
Seeing
added.
none, then for staff updates tonight, Mr. Gaines, what have you got for this evening?
So Mayor, I thought the first thing I'd like to do is talk a little bit about fireworks. So third reading passed tonight, so starting tomorrow, maybe even tonight, we're going to start on an informational campaign that'll be putting up yard signs, posters, flyers, all of those type of things, letting the public know when you can actually legally shoot fireworks, which would be July 3, 4, and 5 here in the city of Cedar Falls. We have a lot of staff members that have done a really good job on putting together this campaign, from billboards to posters and all of the things that I mentioned. So we'll be moving forward with that. We did reach out to the city of Waterloo to see if they wanted their logo on that information, and after about 2 weeks, we didn't get a response, so we moved forward with just a city logo. I've also been working with public safety about enforcement and how that enforcement's going to go. They have a really good plan on using, you've heard some speakers talk about what they're going to use with regard to, is it police officers, is it reserve officers, POCs, PSOs from the fire side, all of those things. They're putting together a really good plan of attack to move forward with that zero tolerance policy. So if there's any other questions, I think Director Birdie's here with, and I thought Chief Howard was here as well. We could answer some questions. The other thing that I wanted to do is maybe just try to manage some expectations about getting some of these things onto the council meeting as soon as, like I'll use June 20th. So shuffling some of this stuff around and having a presentation ready from staff by the end of this week could be pretty tough. That gives us 4 days to really get it into the packet to move out. And then the other question is, you know, a lot of times right after a holiday, we try not to load up some of our committee meetings and such. So would you want to have it on July 5th, which would actually be the Tuesday as well? Or, you know, again, it seems like we're pushing it out a little bit, and that's not intentional. It's just sometimes logistics gets challenging.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
May I ask, and I just want to, are those flyers, even though are they going over to the fireworks stands in Waterloo too?
So I don't believe we have a plan to send ours over to the fireworks stands over there.
Okay.
I think there's going to be some of the same vendors,
Okay.
so they may take some of ours over there. But we have posters for each of those tents locations. We have flyers, handouts, yard signs, all of those things. Actually even have some time from the electronic billboards here in town to put up those notices. So we're really, and not to mention, we'll be doing some social media, as much social media presence as we can.
Okay.
And one of the things that we're going to do is maybe make it aware of how many citations we write. If we write a citation, send that out in social media, not identifying the person obviously, but just saying, hey, this is a no tolerance policy, so everyone knows.
Okay, thank you. Also, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we had a couple of changes and updates for the falls, like the physical setup of it. And I was wondering if you might hear a little bit about some of those changes this year to help some of the past issues we've had.
Mayor, I'll take the first shot at it, and then I'll let Director Sheets jump in. But we have had a couple issues at the falls with maybe some unruly patrons. And we've identified some areas in the falls itself where some of the maybe rowdy activities been starting or brewing, and some of that's been on the grassy area. And what we've done is put some temporary fencing in there to prohibit folks from going back into that area. Another one of the areas that we've seen where maybe some disagreements or some altercations have started is around the basketball hoops, and so we've removed the basketball hoops at this time. It's a shame that we have to do that with regard to the basketball hoops. We've seen some small kids and family members in there, but I think sometimes when it gets to some of the older crowd, it gets a little rowdy, and we're trying to create a wonderful family environment there, and we're hoping that some of these incremental steps will be there. Also like to thank a number of our public safety officers that have been going down there and patrolling that area as well, just because to try to keep that family environment. So,
Okay, thank you.
anything else, Mayor?
Yeah, certainly would recommend for council, if you have time, if you want to go out and just take a stroll. It's great talking with residents at the falls. Certainly happy to have in for, you don't have to pay to go in if you're a council member and you want to just.
I bought a season pass.
Well, you have to, if you go swimming, yeah.
Yeah.
But if you just want to go in and wear this like I do and go in and just chat with folks and seeing the zero tolerance policy as kind of harsh as it is, for zero tolerance on profanity, on fighting, of course, on theft, on some of the things that should get you kicked out. Families are very responsive to that. They're very happy that we're doing that. And so looking forward to a very positive summer, and it's just going to take constant diligence. There will be police patrols there from time to time just to keep the tone what we want it to be. But very much looking forward to a happy summer out there.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I want to comment because I saw there was information, I saw an email and then I saw information from the city on social media. So we were there this past Sunday with my children, and there's still plenty of green space. I think that was a concern I saw from folks, is that we were taking away, that was a lot of grass behind the slides and stuff. There's still lots of green space there. And there was signs, several signs, like yard signs when you came in, not you're saying, promoting kindness and but saying that it is a no tolerance policy. I am sad about the basketball hoops. It is obviously none of us like when a few ruin it for the majority, but I get it. And I did see the police walked through while we were there, and it was almost perfect timing because there were some children not respecting, and they were teenagers not respecting the lifeguards. And so I also encourage folks to go because it's nice to see it actually in action, and we want our kids to be safe while they're there.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, so anything else from staff for tonight?
I think that's it, Mayor.
All right, well then, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.